Hello and thank you for having me. Today I'm talking about climate death, a topic that took shape from within my own art production, from series like Panorama of the Anthropocene and Zombie Capitalism. From this work, I've deepened my awareness of climate change and its ongoing effects, which I think ultimately stem from the flawed economic relations between rich and poor. As the political economist John Bellamy Foster argues, global warming is just one of the many signs of planetary exhaustion, including ocean acidification, the depletion of the ozone layer, the loss of biodiversity, the disruption of nitrogen and phosphorus cycles, desertification, chemical and radioactive pollution, and so on. All these phenomena feel bundled together when we speak of climate change because, as we'll see in a moment, they all carry with them a deeply emotional and psychological charge. This inner charge is what I call climate death, a looming aura seemingly haunting everyone's psyche, the understated presence of an unavoidable demise, the inescapable death of our planetary ecosystem as we know it, and also the death of our economy as we know it. Like it or not, these systems have been overloaded with the great acceleration of capital in the Western Hemisphere since the end of the Second World War, and now globally in all hemispheres since the end of the Cold War. This worldwide capitalist process is based on infinite market growth via the unlimited extraction of natural resources, be it from mineral, floral, or faunal nature, and the unlimited exploitation of human resources from the labor productivity of subordinate classes, races, and genders. Our collective response to this coming death by climate resonates uncannily with what Elizabeth Kubler-Ross calls the 5 stages of grief. The Swiss-American psychiatrist linked this sequence of emotions with the experience of encountering one's mortality, a likely reaction when receiving, for example, a diagnosis of terminal cancer. I claim this is also our collective reaction when encountering climate change, the death of our ecosystem, and soon to follow, the end of our civilization. Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief are denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and finally, consent. Most obviously linked to the revelations of climate change, the first and strongest reaction from capitalist societies facing nature's collapse and mass extinction is denial. Climate change denial. The truth of climate change is well documented, its damage proven, even by ExxonMobil's own private research, confirming since 1977 the true consequences of exponential fossil fuel consumption. Yet, instead of facing these facts or changing their ways, the petrol lobby committed itself to hide this data, deny the evidence, and fund corrupt scientists to contradict observable statistics, deflect and delay any policy change against their profit factories. But once denial is no longer possible, with the continuous breaking of heat records, the escalation of tornadoes, hurricanes and floodings on one side of the globe, and on the other, forest fires, drought, melting glaciers, smog, sandstorms, and so on. Once all this is undeniable, then comes the second phase of climate grief, which is bargaining. For the past 20 years or so, a global consensus of nations and corporations have bitterly admitted that yes, climate change is real, but no, it is not our fault. Among these, British Petroleum effectively bargained their way out of a guilty verdict when in 2004 they coined the term carbon footprint. This distracted the public's attention away from their own toxic enterprise to instead point the finger at consumers, accusing them of individually hurting the environment. And yet, the cumulative evidence is clear that industries are responsible for well above 80% of the planet's pollution. According to geographer Matthew T. Huber, industrial production and intensive agriculture are causing severe ecological harm even before their respective outputs are ready to consume. Moreover, global brands maximize their profit margins by outsourcing assembly lines to faraway lands, overextending supply chains and swelling the exhaust clouds of cargo ships and lorries. These production and supply lines, deploying single-use goods, separately wrapped in disposable boxes, items that break down and come out of fashion via planned obsolescence and disposable trends, have nothing to do with ideals of individual choice or freedom. The talking points uttered at World Economic Forums, COP conferences and other climate summits are simply dedicated to gaslighting consumers into buying new cars, new single-family homes and other goods now fitted with electrical upgrades. But any car model will take space away from wildlife habitats. Electric vehicles use as much road, as many parking lots, and their heavy load of batteries require more energy to move around. The vast expanses of wind and solar farms have only modestly curbed our collective footprint, covering barely 12% of our growing needs for air conditioners, heaters, dryers, washers, cookers, and lawnmowers. And don't forget, we still need to power the machines that cut down trees and build roads to drive us to our suburban homes and drive us to hoard all those electric devices. Recycling is also rapidly losing its appeal. The claim that we will save nature by recycling our fast fashion apparel or outdated by design technology, our single-use water bottles and coffee capsules is bogus. According to Oceana and other organizations studying synthetic pollution, only 9% of all plastic waste produced since 1950 has ever been recycled. Recycling has become just another irrational way to bargain with climate death, a senseless ritual enacted by moving trash around in a vicious circle. As we see more clearly that climate bargaining isn't working, a third grief emerges, an angry reaction rising from the status quo of empty negotiations. On the streets of major cities, hate ferments with the proliferation of dissent against the escalations of war for the monopoly of resources abroad and against the police shackling the poor at home. Increasingly, protests are staged in art museums, the prime location of what Pierre Bourdieu called cultural capital, with recent attacks by Just Stop Oil on masterpieces by Van Gogh and Picasso. This parallels the strikes of Extinction Rebellion on political capital, Black Lives Matter on civil rights capital, Idle No More on ancestral land capital, and Greta Thunberg on academic capital, boycotting school to confront climate change. All these actions are transforming people's grief for a dying world into grievances against corporations killing the world when perpetuating business models that place profits before the well-being of peoples and nature. Unfortunately, anger is also directed towards the growing masses of climate refugees, when compassion should help to see ourselves in them, walking in their shoes, running away from their homes, flooded by monsoons, burned by wildfires, farms and shops scorched in war zones. Instead of seeing all this with compassion, nationalism is blinding us, dividing us between the so-called collective West, NATO against the emerging BRICS nation, drawing new geopolitical front lines and ever more waves of energy inflation, food scarcity, disease, and waste pollution. But anger too will recede and the imminent death of hospitable climate may soon trigger another stage of grief in depression. Climate depression will concern much more than capitalists saddened by their lost fortunes, falling down the drain of peak oil and other extracted insanities. Climate depression might in greater disproportion affect the youngest in our societies, folks facing a longer lifetime in the dystopian world ahead with little hope for a nurturing future. Depression will express itself as anxiety, introversion, insomnia, but also as a loss of motivation or will to fight against climate death. Indeed, this depression could open the floodgates to some of the worst effects of climate change, since in the passivity of our despair, the profit industries will no longer encounter resistance and pursue their extractions until the last dollar burns at the rock bottom of their minds. But as climate depression announces a perilous time of self-doubt, its reflective character could just as well revitalize the spirit of protesters against all odds. Like Camus' Sisyphus, contemplating our cursed faith becomes an essential step to accept the absurdity of our struggle, to then fully commit to its cause, even in the knowledge that this cause is already lost. Climate will change whatever we do, and yet it's never too late to resist the victories of capitalism. Planet Earth is already heating up by more than 1 degree. Hurricanes and wildfires have already gone amok. But if corporations continue to burn fossil fuel until the last drop in the ground, global temperatures may rise by another 8 degrees, and under those circumstances, no human civilization will survive, including capitalism. So our only choices are end capitalism now, or nature will stop it later, much more violently. After denial, bargaining, anger, and depression, let us make peace at the final phase of climate death when reaching consent. We all need to accept, sooner rather than later, come to terms with the end of the Holocene as we know it, and the past 10,000 years of stable climate which allowed for agriculture and industry to flourish. These practices were impossible during the ice ages of the past, and will remain so in the hot ages to come. The more we delay this final stage of consent to accept the finitude of this planet, the closer we get to what Bellamy Foster calls planetary boundaries, closer to climate conditions hostile to all life on Earth. In the warming times ahead, humanity will no doubt struggle to survive, so joining forces will become its only matter of course. The ideology of competition and the survival of the fittest will transition to a principle of strength in numbers. The role of leader in such settings will not be given to greedy hoarders, but to those sharing their most valuable assets and most useful skills with the rest of the group. My hope resides at the final stage of this sequence, after passing the 5 thresholds of climate denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and consent, after we see that the only path to survival on this planet is without capitalism. Capitalism must go. Non-transactional relations must rise from human to human, from human to animal, vegetable and mineral, for health and wealth to flow from each according to their ability, to each according to their needs. Here I paraphrase Marx, but only to oppose this to Louis XV's infamous mantra, Après moi le déluge, venting a pathetic indifference to the ruins of his time and place, like so many of our present rulers, profiteering from planetary exhaustion. In this final stage of climate grief, wasting energy on social jousting, on keeping up with the Joneses, on demonstrating superior class and cultural capital by a conspicuous consumption, these behaviors will be recognized as signs of social decline and failures of altruism. From now on, social relations must remain intersectional and cooperative, uniting to heal the universal woes of famine, war, and disease. To end the divisions of class, race, and gender, as well as ending the separation of human from non-human, it is imperative that we reassess nature not as a wilderness to conquer, but as a totality in the web of life, of things and matter, a nature that will forever contain us.